Everyone in this room is affected one way or the other by the creative economy. It could be what you wear, the music you're listening to, or the movies that you're watching. This panel is going to be talking about the things that affect the growth and development of the creative sector in Africa. I'm going to start with Ayana. So in 2016, you were part of the global team that created the global strategy for expansion of Amazon across the world. And Africa was one of the touch points that you definitely identified. How does it feel to be the person now, not just envisioning, but actually executing that strategy? And what do you think are the opportunities for growth across the creative sector in Africa?
Well, it feels fantastic to be part of that team. I mean, as mentioned, we, from a Prime Video standpoint, we embarked on a global expansion. It was the very end of 2016, and for the past sort of year and a half to 2 years, we've been building upon that foundation and sort of ramping our service across all aspects, content, product, accessibility in sub-Saharan Africa more specifically and more constructively. So it's very exciting to be part of that team, and I think there's, from a creative economy standpoint and from a media and entertainment and a sort of a premium film standpoint, I think there's nothing but opportunity. The biggest opportunity and one of the most wonderful things about sub-Saharan Africa is there's no shortage of good stories. Absolutely no shortage of good stories. And part of our strategy is to help showcase and bring those stories forward, not just for the benefit of our customers in sub-Saharan Africa, but also our customers, our 200 million Prime Video customers in and around the world. So I think there's a ton of opportunity. I think there's a ton of opportunity to help elevate and showcase stories. We always say, for Africans, by Africans, for a global audience, and those things I think directly and indirectly help to cultivate this sort of creative economy with regards to premium and film entertainment that originates in sub-Saharan Africa.
Okay, and just quickly as well, what do you think about the funding? What kind of funding strategies do you have for creatives on the continent, I mean, from an Amazon standpoint?
Well, from an Amazon standpoint, I guess we acquire and fund content in a number of different ways. We have a number of different economic models that we employ, whether that's license of finished product, whether that's commissioning content, whether that's co-productions that we enter into, or things like output deals. For example, we have a number of output agreements that we've entered into with Nigerian filmmakers and studios where we become the global home of their entire theatrical output, their entire slate in a given calendar year. So those are just a number of examples of the types of models that we use as a way of working directly with content creators, filmmakers, be it in Nigeria, South Africa, other parts of the continent. But we use a number of different models and means to sort of acquire the content and really support the creative output of those filmmakers and content creators.
So Mogi, I mean, on your side, you do a different kind of funding. You're more in philanthropy. What challenges are you facing? You also did this great study with USC around this, how Black people, Africans are represented in media. What are your thoughts around that model? And what kind of funding do you need for the kind of things you do?
Okay, so let me start. Africa No Filter, that's the organization that I represent. We are a donor collaborative, so we fund storytellers who can give a different perspective about Africa. Because I think it's really important. If you look at how most people know America, it's not by reading Pentagon Papers, it's by watching Top Gun. That's how you, so film plays a very powerful role, right, in influencing. So we fund storytellers, and one of the big sectors we fund is film, but our funding is very small. So what we've actually done is that we have something called the Last Mile Film Fund, which is really for filmmakers who have run out of money, because filmmakers tend to invest in their production and they forget they need to get to festivals and do a bit of marketing. So that's actually where we play. But we also play with pretty much small, and I'd say emerging filmmakers. And I think the biggest challenge that I feel that they have, and what we constantly get asked for beyond funding, is connections to markets. How do they kind of get their films out there? What festivals should they be at? How do they, get licensing deals? So money is great, and I think, Amazon, if you could fund every filmmaker in Africa, it'd be fantastic, but you can't. So, the other thing that we can help, and the biggest thing, like I said, people need is connections. We need connections to, America, big film markets where they can actually start making money from their content.
I think it's amazing. Please, you can put your hands together. I think it's amazing because platforms like this actually, I mean, have you guys connected today? Anybody? Any deals? No one?
But we should ask, how many creatives are in this room?
Yeah,
how many creatives are here? Don't even be scared. Put your hand right up and wave it in the air like you just don't care. I mean, come on.
And how many of you connected with anyone significant at this conference? Anyone? All right, cool. We'll talk 10%. 10%.
Right.
All right. But Denim, I mean, I think your perspective is unique because you're in front and behind the camera.
Yeah.
You're doing some amazing work. Who's watched Yellowstone? Anyone? So that's the guy. So if you want to take autographs after this. But I mean, but seriously, he's doing great work with
Did I catch you the play?
with the production side. My question to you is this: if there's one thing that would change the landscape, right, in film, in creative industries on the continent, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it's a big focus is capacity, right? We have to have the capacity building aspect, but then we also have to have access. So oftentimes what you find of being on the continent is you get great organizations, great companies that come in and they will kind of give these motivational speeches, right, about what the potential on the continent is, and if you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you can do anything that you want. And it's like, not really, right? Like, this is not really true, but it feels good. So the realities of it is are we focusing on the capacity aspect, or are we so busy trying to be competitive right now that we're now like mortgaging the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road? So if we have the capacity aspect that's happening, and then we also are able to then say, here's the pipeline, right, for actual job opportunities from that, now there's actually starts to be a little bit of an ecosystem, right? Aside from just saying, oh yeah, come learn how to do something, and then if I come and I learn, what's my reward for learning, right? Because there's still not an infrastructure that's built yet. So one of the things that we really work on at Kumo, which is based in Botswana, is really having the television film aspect, but then also spending some significant amount of time with the capacity, because I was one of those people as well, right? Growing up, you learn how to do something. I'm like, okay, great, with all this information, what do I do with it? How do I get opportunity? So capacity building mixed with then the access to me are the top two things. And then of course the financing aspect, but no one's gonna finance you if you're not able to even know what to do with that money, right? So yes.
So I mean, for you, Uzo, you run the Africa Center. That means everything around Africa is on your plate in a sense.
Big shoulders.
Film producer, Beast of No Nation, and so many things. Now, my question to you is this creative economy thing, is that a fad? Is it a bubble? Is it the magic wand that waves all the employment issues on the continent away? What are your thoughts about that?
I feel like you're setting me up. No, I'm gonna approach this with the hat of being a novelist, which is what I do first and foremost, which is not exciting to most people because being a novelist is not a way to make any kind of money at all. Let's just be very honest. And I start there because I think all too often we go, those two words when it's we're talking about a discussion about our continent, creative economy, like they just go right together and everybody just starts to ooh and ah. And what I want to do here is not say that there isn't a pathway, but it is to make the case for creativity as creativity and to disaggregate it from this idea of economy. And I think it's really important because not everything that you do creatively has to have an economic benefit. And in fact, sometimes the benefit for your creative ideas or your creative production won't be realized until 5, 10, 20, 30 years into the future. We have to think about the importance of stories and ideas as stories and ideas, and that the power in that to actually shape and shift culture, shape and shift society, and help us realize our true selves and power. And so when I think about how I write, and I recognize there's a certain luxury to that, but you think about Chinua Achebe writing Things Fall Apart. I doubt that he was writing for a big advance at the time because nobody wanted to publish any kind of African book at the time. He was writing for the power of the idea, the ability to tell that story of a different society before colonialism and that interaction with colonial authorities. That's so powerful. That book has sold almost as many copies as the Bible and has transformed the way that everybody thinks about our continent, whether you're in Nigeria or Botswana or Kenya. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, same thing in terms of his ideas. So I just want to move us away from creative and economy together as a thing that we always have to talk about as Africans yes, money is important, but it's not just money. Our power also resides elsewhere.
Yeah, I would clap to you. That was great. So Moki, quick question. So you recently did a Creative Vibrancy Index, 12 cities across Africa. What did that tell you about the creative landscape on the continent?
Yeah, we did this index to actually try and figure out, we talk a lot about this creative economy and how important the creative industries are, but what is actually happening on the ground in terms of creativity? So what we did, we looked at sort of 3 areas. One was, creative economy, one was cultural vibrancy, and one was enabling environment. And we took the 12 cities and we looked at things like, for example, how many theaters are there? How many screens are there? I mean, apparently in America, there's something like 40,000 movie screens. In Africa, there's 1,000, right? So when you start thinking that we're trying to build a film industry, yeah, where are people going to watch it? We're assuming everyone has television, access to Netflix or Amazon. That's not the case in Africa. So we were looking at things like, where do people actually consume cultural outputs? That's one. We're looking at the enabling environment. For example, where can people learn technical skills? Films, I used to act. I know that there was 100 people on set. There would be like maybe 15, 20 actresses, and all the rest of those people are technical background people, project managers, technical people, to allow us to get that content out. Where are they getting their skills from, right? So we looked at things like that, and it showed us there really is an issue with where people are learning about creative, technical skills. And you refer to the word capacity building, and I'm actually going to tell you, I hate that word because that implies that, we're doing something to help you. We're building your capacity. It's a very development speak. You don't call New York Film Academy a capacity building school. It's not. They're teaching skills. That's what we need. We're teaching skills, and that's what we found. We need more technical skills, to build the ecosystem. So when Burna Boy, releases his album, he's recording everything in Africa, right? It's not doing it in America and then just selling it to us. We should be more than a market. So the Vibrancy Index, I'll tell you which city was ranked top. It actually was Johannesburg across all 3, enabling environment, creative economy, and cultural vibrancy. The second was Cairo, and third was Lagos. And Lagos was on there primarily because of Nollywood, because of its creative economy, because there was a lot of outputs and there was industry, there was trade, there was exchange with cultural products. And actually Cairo won overall for enabling environment.
Amazing. When you look at the landscape of the creative economy, I mean, it's like a buzzword, right? Everyone's talking about creative. I don't think there's ever been this amount of funding available for the sector. I mean, AfriXM launched a $1 billion fund. I know that the AFDB did a $600 million fund as well. Amazon has given us money as well, and many other people. And the question really is this: how come with all these funds available, people can't access any of these things? Because you find that there's a problem around monetization of IP itself. What are the things we need to do to ensure that IP is now the same value as a building or as a piece of land? Because that's always been a problem with how you can access the funding itself. So any ideas is open to the crew. Uzo, you can go. Uzo wants to go.
I feel like
no, go ahead.
No, I mean, but you're saying it, right? IP is a $2.2 trillion industry, right? And so that's massive. And so when you speak to a lot of people on the continent, they have tremendous amount of stories, right? But the biggest thing becomes like, what's that nexus point? How do we have access, right? The industry in of itself is very much like a club, right? So it's very easy, like once you're in, it takes a long time to get in there, right? And so it becomes a little bit easier to maneuver. But then when you look at what the submitting process for your projects and how long that takes, right? And then how much money you may be able to get from that. And yes, once you have now decided that finally there's an opportunity to get your stuff on a platform, you don't own it anymore, right? And then, so then what does that benefit, right? So then that comes back to the whole creative aspect of it is like, I'm doing it to create it, but then I also want to be able to now have an opportunity to monetize.
Yeah.
But now I don't even get to really monetize it in the same way because you'll own it for the rest of your life and you'll monetize it, right? So something I sat on for 10 years, you get to take it, and then perpetuity, you get to have it. So it becomes one of those things where I feel like that's where entrepreneurship really comes into the play, where you have to start engaging these different sectors outside of just the television and film sector, because they will have a completely different outlook on the way that maybe they just want to splash around a little bit. Maybe they're not as interested in the IP aspect. They just want a good ROI, right? And then that becomes a little bit interesting, right? So I think that there's a way to have both, but I think the IP thing on the continent is a massive conversation, right? Because that's one of the biggest issues that so many people are having. So I feel like we have to do, like here in the US, that creative financing opportunity, right? When people want to go buy a house, I feel like we have to get a little bit more into the creative aspects of how we can do things on the back end of television and film, and making sure that our people are not being taken advantage of from that standpoint.
So can I just to add to that, and I think you mentioned like AFDB and After Exim. I think even they will tell you that for the funds they put together, you know, and they're awesome, but they'll tell you themselves that they do big infrastructure deals. They do, you know, like oil. They do, you know, like roads. And the way that you think about financing those is very different from the way that you think about financing film. And so, you know, there's a need to shift to understand exactly how, you know, within that space of IP, how that's done. And I don't think when you know, we'd like to throw out the big numbers, right? But we also have to realize that those numbers and the way that people think about those numbers may not fit for the current state of the place that we're talking about. That's one. I think two, you know, it often, you know, again, I think we shift the discussion to film and television and, you know, like when we talk about creative economy, but you know, we were all talking about this before, that it is more expansive than that, and that there are other ways and other things of thinking about. So if you want to talk about the expanded creative economy, if you're talking about fashion, right, that's distribution, supply chains, agriculture, growing, like there's a whole other aspect around that. And the IP then becomes, is it just the designer sitting in a studio who is, you know, cutting their fabrics? Like that's really, really important, and not to knock, but are there other aspects of that we're not also thinking about that are actually equally as important as part of this discussion? That's just something that I think we should really bring in.
Okay, and Ayana, do you want to jump in?
No, I mean, I quite honestly agree with almost everyone's comments. I mean, I think the only thing I might add upon that is even I think, you know, from my experience, and I work with a number of, you know, content creators across the continent, even to broach a conversation about IP ownership, there's still a baseline level. I'll use the word infrastructure, right? The number of times when, let's say, I've been having a conversation and I may ask about something called, you know, chain of title. The reality is some of these concepts, and maybe they're sort of legal concepts, but they're IP ownership concepts as well. There's still an opportunity to help invest and educate and understand and provide and build that type of infrastructure. Some things that are already a little bit more mature in, like, whatever, Hollywood, maybe Bollywood, what have you. But I think there's some opportunity there. So I agree with really the comments that everyone has made, but I'll just say that I actually think to really dig into and have constructive conversations, because I think the premise of some of the comments is that maybe like it's kind of exploitative from a distribution standpoint. That's not always the case, but I think there does need to be just more investment in sort of baseline things that really help ground a creative industry, at least again in the film, the media and entertainment space, things that we take for granted and other, you know, sort of market segments around the world that I think are really important to help protect for all parties involved, quite honestly, in from a sort of transactional standpoint, and make sure that those things are there. So there's some opportunity there as well.
Yeah, I totally, just to add to that, I definitely, I agree with you, right? It's like there's that educational aspect, right? And this is one of the things I am very, very big on for me personally is you have to know all aspects of entertainment. And like is a creative economy, it's the entertainment sector is the only sector that actually employs all sectors, right? It is agriculture, it's attorneys, it's accountants, it's all of these different things. And so it's like, how do we begin to tie that nucleus? And there's ways to be able to come in to have it to these bigger corporations and be able to say, if we have the right knowledge and information, we can have an entirely different type of conversation as well, right? So it's about how are we positioning, what things are we doing as people that understand this, what are we doing in our everyday to make sure that we're able to make sure that we're bringing those people in and not just saying, let's foster your creativity when we also know that there's a whole business element, right, that we need to get you prepared for as well. So as much as we talk about the, focus on your passion, if you focus on your passion in too much, sometimes depending on what you want to do, because it's all about really what you want to do, right, that might make you poor. Right, so like you really have to get into a space where you understand I'm passionate about something, but also at the same time I need to understand all the business aspects. I need to understand the business upscaling and then get myself around the right people so that I can make sure that I'm being fostered in the right way.
And you see, and that's precisely why the creative economy is so powerful, because it's not just about the creatives. If it was, I wouldn't be sitting here. I can't do anything, but I do understand the business. I've been an intellectual property lawyer for 20 years. I understand the ecosystem. I understand how the deals are done. And so when you think about the domino effect of a successful show, you're thinking about hundreds of producers, craftsmen, fashion designers, makeup artists. So it's there's a lot of flow through that. And I think what's amazing about the creative industry is that it's not driven by government. So maybe we don't need government, but we do. Because we need to get the policies right. So think about if you're going to shoot a movie and you know that there's a 25% tax credit in, say, Accra, then it makes more sense to shoot in Accra than go to Mongolia, for example, right? So how do we engage, and how are we in our own spaces engaging with government to get the right policies, to get the right lobbying? Because you see, they do not really care about you until they can see the flow through of money. So what are we doing to enhance that in our respective spaces? As we round up, we have maybe 8 more minutes. I'll take one or two questions.
We're going to be right on the dot.
Let's do it.
I really just want to address that, because I feel that particularly in this environment, it's always about, like policies, what can government do to help? And we've seen the success of Nollywood. It wasn't government that helped there. And I think as an industry and a sector, I think creatives need to mobilize. We need to mobilize ourselves. For example, when we talk about IP issues and maybe a network is, it actually happened to me. We sold something. They have my IP in perpetuity forever and ever and ever, not for 10, 15 years, forever. Now, if I went negotiating as an independent filmmaker, if I had gone as a sector, a bunch of filmmakers, we would have had some leverage with that network, because then we stop all content. We won't give you any more content. And maybe that's what's happening with the screenwriters thing right now. And I feel that as an industry, we need to mobilize collectively, not individually. And I think that's the challenge for us as a continent. We do a lot of things. And maybe creatives, we don't really kind of, the idea is like we don't really want to kind of like get together, but I feel that that's something we need to consider doing. And I think government needs to provide us.
The thing I like about Moki's work, though, and what you do is that you make that more possible, because you do something that people aren't doing, which is collecting that data about stuff. Which is, a lot of conversations are had without real understanding of like some of the data that's out there. And so, we're working on that project around media and representation. But, with the one you guys, how many, it was like 7,000 films or something that you went through?
Yeah, for this one about how Africa is covered in the US, it was 700,000 pieces of content we went through that had Africa in it in some way. And, and the results of that showed us that there really is a problem in America with how Africa is perceived. So,
And so if you want to talk about changing policies, right, if you want to talk to people about how people are represented, if you take that data and you say, okay, this is what's going on. If you take the vibrancy study that you've done and you say, hey, listen, if you want to have a functioning sector, you have to look at this, 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 and this. Here's Cairo, here's Johannesburg, here's Lagos. Where are you, Nairobi? Right?
Nairobi's quite low down, actually.
Right. You see,
as
but
the Kenyans found out.
It's a very different discussion with the policymaker than it is like, oh, we need to have a creative economy.
Right. Because there's also not approaching it from a creative thought process, right?
Exactly.
They're approaching it from a business and economic standpoint. So you have to change the entire narrative. You can't just come in and say we need to have a creative industry because we're passionate about it, right? Like it's just not
Exactly.
enough. And I think that's one of the challenges on the continent is oftentimes policymakers do look at creatives as like a bunch of like adults that just never wanted to grow up as being children, right? So they just like want to keep running around and playing make-believe, and it's like, no, there's a real economy here, right? So like how are we approaching this conversation from like, let's just put the passion over here, right, for a second, and then let's come in, and part of that as filmmakers is being creative, right? So how can you come into an environment that's not necessarily conducive to your everyday life and change it, right? And make that creative. And so part of that is don't look at it like, oh, I'm trying to go and be government, or I feel like I'm selling out. It's like, no, you have to find more creative ways and more creative opportunities to be able to do that. So you can use data, you can talk about how IP is a $2.2 trillion industry, and as businesses, they want 5%. Any good business wants 5%. What's 2.2 trillion if you can get 5% of that? What would that do for the GDP of a country, right? So now all of a sudden that becomes interesting, right? So it becomes getting more people that are in that side of it that I think might be able to help undergird a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm trying to play
well said.
make-believe.
So,
I don't know about y'all.
yeah, you can clap, you can clap, you can clap.
It's like, what are we gonna do? You gotta win.
So we'll take maybe 2 questions. We have 4 minutes, and I'm going to be very strict. But one thing you said, which is really critical, is that creative people collaborate when they're creating, but they don't do it when they're doing business, right? And that's very important. So we're business people, we're creative, but without the business, there's no show. So we need to think about how we get the right professionals to do our business plans, to do the research, and put that together. I'll take 2 questions. I will always take a lady first because I was raised properly. And the only lady here is, okay, her. And then I'll take a gentleman. Okay, but
There's so many of them that are raising their hands.
So I'll take a gentleman in the back, OJ. So please go ahead.
First of all, thank you very much. What a stunning panel. So you were talking about connections, and I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, Amazon, are you connecting the dots here?
I'm sorry?
I said you were talking about connections earlier on, and I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, I hope Amazon sitting there is connecting the dots.
Yeah, should we have her number? Yeah. We're like, yeah. I think that's what she's asking, right? Like if we connect.
That's crazy.
I'm Amazon's official PR representative.
Perfect.
We have their, we're all in a WhatsApp group now.
No.
They're gonna
Okay,
to her about
that was
my
quick.
flight to JFK.
Gentleman in the
It's
back.
gonna be great.
And if we're as quick as she is, I can take 2 more questions. So
That was great. We need more questions like that.
I'll take a lady on this side. If there's anyone, then I'll take you, sir.
Yeah. The question is that everybody is aware of the potential, and also the American as well as African public wanting to see more of African movies and features and all that. But the African movie business has been dominated by Nigeria. Is it a good approach that we have only one cluster supplying to everyone? Or should we have a very dispersed, distributed kind of a film industry, or OTT, or a satellite television industry? Because going by Netflix and Amazon, anybody who has the ability to have a HDMI cable is in a position to see anything that he wants. That's not a problem. But here we are talking about helping the creative minds, because that helps. I'm a professor by profession. I love the whole point of educating people, getting them creative, getting them to enjoy their life.
So I was going to say,
which is the best?
I don't have any problems with being dominated by Nigeria as a Nigerian. But I think, but to your question, I think the point of I think 2 things. One is there's what gets a lot of attention just because of volume, but that's not to discount what people are doing in many other places. And also remember, if you think about the Nigerian film industry, it's not just Nollywood. There are other places where other films are being made, Kannywood, for example, right? And then think about other places across the continent. So there's the story that's put up, that's headline, and that gets attention because of cash flows, whatever, all that sort of stuff. And also because Nigerians are just loud people.
It's not the way loud, there's a lot of us.
But then there are other places where there's really amazing creative work getting done. And then I think to your point, how do we make sure that we are creating platforms and systems where everyone can come up? Yeah.
And can I just comment? I mean, I do know, again, Nollywood is probably, I think, most prolific after Bollywood. I mean, larger than the Hollywood. Then there are things like Conniewood. My own perspective is that the rising tide lifts all boats. And I don't look at it as sort of mutually exclusive. If content that originates in Nollywood, yes, it's more prolific from an output and a volume standpoint, but there's wonderful content that originates in South Africa, Kenya, Morocco, Ghana. I mean,
Senegal.
So Kenya. I mean, so many different countries in different ways. So yes, I don't think it's not like negative, and I don't think the fact that Nollywood has been so prolific with the actual volume of output, it sort of detracts. I just think, quite honestly, that the more content that originates on the continent that gets showcased, for a global audience, and again, an audience on the continent, the rising tide will lift all boats. So I think it's all beneficial and sort of mutually supportive, but not necessarily. I don't think Nollywood detracts from other content that originates.
And they used a great model. I know we're leaving, but Nigeria also used a phenomenal model, which is they understood that we can make a feature film for $25,000 or for $70,000. They put it out there into the world, and people would laugh at it. But this was a way that they were learning. So they used great marketing. Were able to get out into the thing, and this is part of the thing. So not every single time you want to create a project do you need $10 or $15 million to do it. So I think this is that kind of rising tide about we can also learn some of these models and these creative opportunities that Nigeria has used as well.
And he's from Botswana, so.
And I'm from Botswana.
So it's cool. One more person, and then we're out.
Yeah.
Okay. My name is OJ, and by the way, I'm Nigerian too.
Of course.
All right, so my question is, we've spoken about expression of creativity. We've spoken about the business side of the expression of our creativity and our work. How about the legal angle? Nobody is talking about the legal aspect of the business of expressing our creativity. I'll give you an example.
Well, wait, so let's take it from there, because I know these guys have got to get off. They've got flights to catch. So why don't we go ahead?
They have to.
They have to.
So yeah, we have to. So basically, just one question.
So it's the legal
How
question.
about the legal part?
Yeah.
Yes, the protection
go ahead.
of the creativity that we carry.
But I think that's a conversation, right?
Yeah, it's
Which
a really broad question.
We have to have a conversation about like IP protection, but then also this is what she was bringing up about doing more in the investment of teaching more of the business side of it. I think maybe you came in a little bit late because we were talking about this in the beginning, is investing more, not only just in the creative industry, but a lot of the back end things, right? So investing in teaching in the lawyers and the accounting and teaching artists to become more like business people as well. But I want to leave that to you guys.
Can I just quickly say, one of the things that we do that's been very popular in terms of adding more to just our grant making is that we're teaching skills, right? So it's things like how do you make yourself sustainable creative? And one of the sessions we had a lawyer on to come and explain about the legal side. We've had people come and talk about how to apply for money, how to keep a budget going, simple things, because creatives have to be business people just to be sustainable.